Drama unfolded in the House of Commons when Justin Trudeau and the Liberals tried to humiliate Pierre Poilievre in front of everyone. But in a surprising turn, Poilievre quickly tore apart their arguments one by one, leaving Trudeau speechless and visibly frustrated. The heated exchange highlighted Poilievre's strong debating skills, while Trudeau and the Liberals appeared embarrassed after their attempts backfired. And just as the tension seemed to settle, something even more shocking happened, keeping the room on edge.
The Prime Minister wants you to know that the status quo is unacceptable, that Canada has become an unfair country where young people, an entire generation, cannot afford a home and families cannot afford food. And if he finds out who's been running this place for the last 9 years, there will be hell to pay. Prime Minister complete his investigation and tell us who's been in charge for the last decade.
Mr. Speaker, when we got elected, first thing we did was raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% and lower them for the middle class, a measure that the Conservative Party voted against. We've continued to invest in young people, invest in standing up a national housing strategy after the previous government had completely ignored housing, and the former housing minister, who is now leader of the opposition, was responsible for creating exactly 6 affordable homes in his time as minister. We've continued to invest, and we're going to continue to make sure that the economy is fair for every generation, and that means asking the wealthiest to pay a little more so we can put more money in the pockets of the middle class.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has got to stop getting his facts from his incompetent housing minister's Twitter account. Yes. This is the same guy who, as immigration minister, lost track of 1 million people. When I was housing minister, we built 92,782 new apartment units with an average rent of $973. How many apartments will the Prime Minister build at the price of $972 a month this year?
Speaker, our housing plan is the most ambitious and comprehensive in Canada's history, and will unlock close to 4 million homes by 2031. This happens because we're working with municipalities, we're working with provinces to increase the levels of ambition. We've put out the most comprehensive and ambitious housing plan this country has ever seen, because we know that making sure that young people can afford a home, making sure we change the way homes are built in this country, is about building a stronger future for everyone in this country. That's what fairness for every generation looks like. That's what this government is focused on, while they're focused on cuts.
Full Leader of the Opposition.
Well, we will cut the rent. When I was Minister of Housing, we paid half as much for rent in Canada that we pay today. And on that question of his ambitious housing plan, I decided to read all about it in their 2015 platform. They said, "We will make it easier for Canadians to find an affordable place to call home." That was 9 years ago. Wow. They doubled the cost since that promise was made, and then they repeated the promise yesterday. Why do we expect the same promise with the same programs and the same Prime Minister to be kept this time?
Our housing plan will unlock 3.87 million new homes by cutting red tape, by reforming zoning, by lowering costs of home building, by using public lands and vacant government offices for housing. We're making it easier to save up for a tax-free for a down payment. We're helping end chronic homelessness and make homes more affordable. We're going to continue doing it.
Who pays? Who pays for this latest $50 billion orgy of spending by this costly Prime Minister? We know who won't pay. It won't be those with trust funds that protect their millions of inheritance like the Prime Minister, nor the billionaires that invite him to their private Caribbean islands. They'll hide their money. You know who will pay? You will pay. You, the welder or waitress who can't pay your mortgage because he's inflated the mortgage rates. You will pay because he carbon taxed your food and now you can't feed your kids. Why should you pay for him?
Speaker, what the Leader of the Opposition is saying is that he stands with the ultra-wealthy 0.1% in this country, and everyone else is on their own, because that's that's what he would do as he slashes programs, as he slashes investments, as he doesn't build the homes necessary, as he doesn't have a plan to fight climate change and create good jobs, as he has stood against affordability measures, as he stands against seniors getting dental care, Mr. Speaker. He is choosing to stand with the ultra-wealthy while we are investing in Canadians and building a stronger future that is fair for everyone.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he is the ultra-wealthy. He hid his family fortune in a tax-sheltered trust fund so he wouldn't have to pay the same tax as everyone else. He vacations with the ultra-wealthy on their private islands in tax-preferred locations where they can hide their money and avoid paying their fair share here in Canada. And now he's paying off the ultra-wealthy by spending $54 billion on debt interest, more than on health care. Why give more money to the ultra-wealthy bankers and bondholders instead of the nurses and doctors?
Young people see right through this Prime Minister. They know they're getting ripped off, and they know the reason for it. Today, rent is doubled, grocery prices are sky high, and we're paying some of the highest cell phone bills in the world. The reason is because of corporate greed. This Prime Minister refuses to take it on, and the Conservatives, they're afraid anytime we mention corporate greed because they want to defend those corporations. The Conservatives don't want me to talk about this, but will the Liberals take on corporate greed, which is driving up the cost of living?
Here, Mr. Speaker, we made a choice. We made a choice to invest in Canadians, and that started when we took office because the previous government had not invested in Canadians, continued to choose cuts to services, continue to choose austerity over the kinds of investments that a confident country should be making in its citizens. And that's where we have stepped up, and that's where we are stepping up right now to make sure that young people have the opportunities to build a strong future themselves by asking the wealthiest 0.1% to pay more in taxes. Unfortunately, the Leader of the Opposition continues to stand with the ultra-wealthy while we stand with...
The Prime Minister blamed immigration for housing costs and the immigration minister who caused it all. Then he made that minister responsible for housing. Since that time, that minister has a $4 billion housing accelerator that he admits will not build any homes, no specific homes. And in fact, since it began, housing starts have gone down this year, and his housing agency says they'll go down next year and the year after that. How is it the Prime Minister can spend $4 billion on a housing accelerator that decelerates home building?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I'm happy to talk about the housing accelerator because it stands in direct contrast with any plan that the Leader of the Opposition has put forward to pick fights with municipalities and provinces on housing. We're actually stepping up with investments that are allowing for more densification, for 4 units as of right, to make sure there's better use of public lands, including by municipalities and provinces, by making sure we're changing the math around building affordable homes to unlock millions of homes over the coming years. This is the work that we're doing right across the country with people who are ambitious about solving the housing crisis. If the Leader of the Opposition doesn't want to help solve it, he needs to keep getting out of the way.
Well, it was solved when rent was $973 a month, Mr. Speaker, until he came along. But more proof that he is not worth the cost after 9 years. He's blaming the whole world. If the world is to blame for the housing problems in Canada, then why is it that housing here is 50 to 75% more expensive than in the United States? Why is it that housing costs have risen faster than in any other G7 country relative to incomes? Why is it that we have the fewest homes per capita despite having the most land and the most lumber? Why? Is it him?
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite well knows that Canada's population is growing faster than our fellow countries around the world, and that is a good thing. It is a good thing that we continue to draw in people to be successful in this country. Canada is actually on solider footing fiscally than any of our other G7 partners, with a lower debt to GDP ratio, a lower deficit, and a continued focus on creating the jobs and the future that Canadians need.
That is from his 2015 budget. And now, 9 years later, he can only point to 13 homes on those public lands. And yesterday, he promised a rapid review of all the federal land portfolios. Rapid review. How rapid? Another 9 years?
Trudeau and Poilievre have very different ideas on how to solve Canada's housing crisis. Trudeau's housing plan involves significant government spending to increase housing availability and affordability for low-income families. This includes programs like the Housing Accelerator Fund to fast-track building projects and expand affordable housing. While the goal was to make homes more accessible, especially for younger Canadians and low-income families, this came with a cost. Canadians saw increased taxes on wealthier individuals to help fund these projects, along with new rules to address housing supply shortages. Despite the government's efforts, critics argued that Trudeau's policies added to inflation, increasing the cost of living for average Canadians. And by October 2024, not much has changed. Trudeau stays committed to government-led solutions, while Poilievre continues to push back. He argues that Trudeau's policies, including the carbon tax, are making homes more expensive. Poilievre's approach focuses on cutting bureaucracy, speeding up construction approvals, and pressuring cities to meet housing targets. He blames Trudeau's high spending and taxes for driving up home prices and making life less affordable for Canadians. As this debate unfolds, Canadians are closely watching to see which approach will actually make a difference in their daily lives.